going to be Mr. Jeremie Greer, the founder and CEO of Liberation in a Generation. And he will be bringing us the keynote for this morning. Mr. Greer or Dr. Greer?
Hello, no, it's Mister.
Okay.
I don't deserve that title, Doctor, but I'll take it. So I'm going to share my screen. So thank you all for allowing me to come speak with you today. I'm really excited about the topic that you all are talking about. And I'm gonna zoom out a bit though, but I'm gonna try to connect it to what you all are talking about, particularly as it relates to Black-owned businesses and small businesses across the country. And what I'm gonna talk about is really a need to bring broader economic liberation to people of color, and that broader economic liberation, I believe, will equate to a better environment for the Black businesses that you all are going to discuss over the course of the next 3 days. Before I get going, though, a bit about Liberation and Generation. We're a national organization providing that really is trying to envision an economy where all people of color, Black, brown, indigenous people belong and are no longer systematically held out of the systems that we need to thrive in this economy. And that's particularly important to Black businesses because, as you all know, Black businesses are not just a mechanism of wealth for the business owners and their families, but they're also pillars of the Black community. And it's what really hold up the Black community. And I know this really well because I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota originally. I'm from the Midwest, but I'm from a community called Rondo. It's an old historic Black community that really was self-sustaining. It was the Black dollar stayed in the community. There were co-ops, there were Black-owned businesses, churches, civic societies, and all of that. You know, when you talk, communities like Tulsa and Wilmington have become more aware and people are more popularized, but there were communities like that all across the country, and I'm from one of those. Although I'd never seen that myself, I was too young, but we heard about it as a community. But despite all that thriving economic Black community, this is what St. Paul looked like in that time. This is a red line map from St. Paul, and the communities in red are places where banks would not provide loans. So the economic sustainability in those communities was within those communities. They weren't getting help from the federal government or from banks. This is Rondo on that St. Paul map. It's D4. It was a place in where I'm from, and it was right down the heart. It was like most main streets. Rondo Avenue is where all these businesses thrive. Well, this is Rondo Avenue today. That's Interstate 94. So you saw that red line map, and the federal government determined that where we're going to put an interstate highway is right down the heart of a Black community. And what was in where those cars are going back and forth were a lot of those Black businesses. And the reason why I tell this story is because we have to understand that we are operating in a system and an economy that by design has been set up to really depress the economic vitality of Black and brown people so that wealthy individuals can thrive. And while you're talking about the tools and those important tools that you're talking about this week, understand that there needs to be a broader economic transformation in order for people to actually be able to thrive in this economy. And an economy that I call, and my colleague Solana Rice and I call, the oppression economy. It's really an economy that, as I said, has systematically been created so that it can suppress the economic vitality of Black and brown people so that wealthy elites can thrive and profit. And I'm going to illustrate what that cycle, what we call that cycle of economic oppression is. And it starts with something really uncomfortable. But I think we all know that racism is profitable, that corporations, since the founding of this country, have profited from racism, profited from creating a permanent underclass of Black people and being able to exploit them for profit. And that racism bleeds to our own economic the suppression of our own economic vitality. It's why we have doubled the unemployment rate. It's why Black businesses are value is half that of white businesses. It's why we have homelessness in our country, where people of color, Black and brown, are more likely to be homeless. Like this is why these things happen, and it's because of racism. And that economic suppression leads to our political suppression. It allows them to segregate us in communities so that they can suppress our vote. It allows us to be put into places where we don't have democratic rule. I'm in the DC area, and it's not an accident that DC does not have a representative in Congress or 2 senators, and it's not a state. It's because that city is largely Black. And then it hampers our ability to really influence the democracy that really is in charge of distributing the resources and wealth throughout this country. And it ensures that we don't get our fair share of the value that we contribute to the economy that we're a part of. And this plays out in all areas of the economy. And I'm going to use one that isn't probably as familiar, but I think we know is really important. And that's the prison industrial complex as an example. The prison industrial complex is a $182 billion a year industry. It includes private prisons, it includes telecom companies, it improves food and commissary companies, it includes healthcare companies, all that are making a profit of the housing of largely Black people in prison. It leads to, once people are released from prison, having a 27% unemployment rate, which is higher than the overall unemployment rate at any time in our history. That includes during the Great Depression, and includes right now during this pandemic. And in 48 states prohibit the ability of formerly incarcerated people to vote. There are 3 places where formerly incarcerated people can vote. It's the District of Columbia, Vermont, and Maine. Everywhere else, there's some prohibition on the ability of formerly incarcerated people to vote, which means 1.6 million formerly incarcerated people do not have any access to participate in our democracy through the very fundamental right of voting. And then you can understand why you can create a system that doesn't represent them, in which the racist act of putting them in prison is how profit can be gained. And we live in a economy where the narrative has been created to justify this type of oppression, right? And they do it by pointing the finger back at us, back at Black people. We're lazy, we're uneducated, we're unsophisticated, we're morally corrupt and bankrupt. These are all reasons that have been given to justify the system that we're operating in that hampers our ability to thrive, so that the elite can prosper, so the elite can build their wealth. And this is a statistic that I read a while back that just blew my mind. The richest 400 people in this country have more wealth than the entire Black population and a third of the Latino population combined. I'm gonna say that again. 400 wealthiest individuals in this country, almost entirely white men, have more wealth than the Black population, the entire Black population, and a third of the Latino population combined. That does not happen by accident. That does not happen because of some narrative that they tell about how we're not deserving. It has to do with systemic racism in our economy. And that systemic racism plays itself out through theft of indigenous land, theft of labor, and it has happened historically. It comes out through exclusion to mainstream systems, mainstream economic systems that allow Black and brown people to be exploited by corporations. And that exploitation comes with exploiting our labor, exploiting our dollar, and so on. And I'm going to leave you with 2 things that we need to do, really, to move this to the next place. And like I said, I believe that this will benefit not only Black people widely, but also Black businesses in particular. The first thing we have to do is dismantle what we call the oppression economy. And we need to do that through large, bold, transformational policy change at the federal, state, and local levels. And there's 4 steps to really dismantling that economy. First, we have to end the criminalization of people of color. Just our existence can no longer be criminalized. And it becomes a justification for holding us back from accessing economic opportunity. We have to end the dual financial system. You all are going to talk about capital markets today. We have one system that has 401ks, mutual funds, home equity lines of credit, all kinds of stuff to help people build wealth. And then we have a whole nother system that is really concentrated in Black and brown communities that is extractive. Payday loans, car title loans, subprime lending. We have to end this dual financial system so we can all access the type of financial tools we need to build our wealth and thrive. The second, we need to curb corporate power. One of the biggest enemies of Black-owned businesses is the monopoly called Amazon. It is pushing Black businesses out of business. It is extracting their intellectual capital. And we have to begin to curb that corporate power and put the power back in workers and put the power back in small business owners. And we have to end the political suppression of people of color, because in order to do these things, we have to have the government on our side. And the way to do that is for us to be actively involved in our politics and our democracy. And the second thing we have to do is build a liberation economy. And that liberation economy also has 4 steps, do we believe? One, that all basic needs, all people of color have their basic needs met. We have a basic income. We have access to healthcare. We have access to higher education. That we have safety and security. That we have access to affordable and quality housing. That we have access to generational wealth. You know, I think this is where a reparations conversation really can and should be had. That all of our contributions are valued and belong. You know, that if we want to work, we can work. If you want to start a business, you have access to the tools to start that business. That work that Black women, for example, have been doing for centuries, like caring for children, caring for the elderly, caring for just society and people, is something that is valued and compensated in this economy. And then finally, that all people of color belong, no matter how you show up, who you show up as, whether you're disabled, whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, whether you're an immigrant, that you have access to the tools in the economy so that you can thrive and you can do well. And again, I believe that we have to do all of this through a real transformation of our economy, and that all of the tools that you are going to discuss are going to be able to actually work better and work for Black and brown communities if we do that transformational work to create that liberation economy. So with that, thank you all for inviting me to this really important conversation that you all are having, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Greer, for those words of encouragement and inspiration.